The notary's pen stopped moving mid-signature. I watched him set it down on the desk like it had burned him. He'd been professional the entire appointment. Quiet, efficient, the kind of man who probably notarized 40 documents a week without blinking. But something in my file had made his hands go still. "Miss Calloway," he said, and his voice had dropped half a register. "I need to ask you something before we go any further." I thought it was a clerical error. Missing initials, wrong date, something mundane. My Aunt Rosalie's estate was complicated. 3 properties, a brokerage account, a small business she'd run out of her garage for 30 years, and I'd already corrected 2 paperwork mistakes that week. I smiled, the way you smile when you're tired and just want to get through an appointment. "Of course," I said. "What is it?" He looked up the door, then back at me. "Is your husband here with you today?" "No, he's at work. Is that a problem?" He folded his hands on top of the file. "Ms. Calloway, I've been doing estate work for 22 years. I need you to listen to me very carefully right now, and I need you to promise me you won't react until I finish." I stopped smiling. "My name is Vivian Calloway. I'm 31 years old. I grew up in Boise, Idaho, in a house where my Aunt Rosalie was a permanent fixture. Every Sunday dinner, every birthday, every crisis. She never married, never had children of her own, and somewhere along the way I became the daughter she'd always wanted. When she passed away last spring from a stroke, she left me everything. Her Victorian in Portland, her cabin in Central Oregon, her savings, her business. About $1.4 million total, once everything was appraised. I didn't come from money. My parents worked hard their whole lives and had very little to show for it. The inheritance felt like being handed a life raft I hadn't known I needed. It also, as I would later understand, made me a target. I'd met my husband 2 years earlier at a work conference in Seattle. He was charming and sharp, the kind of man who makes a room feel like it rearranged itself around him. He sold software solutions to mid-size companies, traveled constantly, always had a story. On our 3rd date, he remembered I'd mentioned wanting to visit Iceland, and he'd bookmarked 3 articles about the Northern Lights without being asked. I thought that meant he was paying attention to me. I understand now he was paying attention to what I responded to. We got married 14 months after we met. Small ceremony, my aunt's backyard. She was still alive then, just barely, and she sat in a wheelchair by the rose bushes the whole afternoon. Afterward, when my new husband had gone inside to get drinks, she took my hand and held it a little too long. "He's very polished," she said. I thought she meant it as a compliment. 6 months after the wedding, Aunt Rosalie passed. My husband was wonderful through the grief. Attentive, patient, there. He made sure I ate. He handled calls I couldn't face. He sat with me on the floor of her Portland house while I cried into a box of her things, and he didn't try to rush me through it. I thought he loved me. I thought the grief showed me who he really was. It did. Just not in the way I understood at the time. The notary's name was Mr. Featherstone. 60-something, reading glasses, the kind of careful calm that comes from decades of seeing other people's messes. He pulled a single sheet from the bottom of my file and turned it to face me. "This document came through our office 8 weeks ago," he said. "It's a power of attorney. It grants full financial authority over the Rosalie Calloway estate. All accounts, all properties, to your husband." I stared at it. At my aunt's signature at the bottom, at the date, which was 6 weeks before she died, when she was on hospice care and could barely hold a pen. "I didn't authorize this," I said. "I know," he said, "because I notarized it, and I've been losing sleep about it ever since." He explained slowly, measuring each word. My husband had come to his office alone. He'd presented himself as managing the estate on behalf of the family, said the principal was too ill to travel. He'd brought a woman with him, someone Mr. Featherstone assumed was a colleague who had signed as my aunt. The signature was close. Close enough that at the time, in a busy week, Mr. Featherstone had processed it, but something had been nagging at him. He'd gone back and compared the signature to other documents in the file. The handwriting was off, the pressure was wrong, and the woman who'd signed was not, he was now certain, my Aunt Rosalie. Someone had forged my dying aunt's signature to hand my husband control of her entire estate. I sat in that chair for a long time without speaking. The air in the room felt different, thicker. I kept looking at the document like it would change if I stared at it hard enough, like some explanation would surface that didn't mean what I knew it meant. What happens if he uses this? I said finally. If it's accepted by the financial institutions, he would have full legal authority to liquidate assets, transfer funds, execute property transactions, without your involvement or knowledge. My hands were steady. I was surprised by that. I'd expected them to shake. Does he know you've seen a discrepancy? No. You're the first person I've called. I looked at him. Don't tell him. Don't tell anyone yet. He nodded once, like he'd been hoping I would say exactly that. I drove home from that appointment on autopilot, both hands on the wheel, watching the lights change at intersections without really seeing any of it. My husband. I'll call him Nathan because saying his name now feels like touching something that burned me, was picking up dinner. He'd texted me a photo of the menu from the Thai place we liked, asking if I wanted the green curry or the basil noodles, the picture of a normal Tuesday evening. I texted back, green curry sounds great. Then I pulled into a parking lot and sat there for 20 minutes thinking. Nathan had always been supportive about the estate, attentive even. He'd asked a lot of questions about the Portland house, square footage, the neighborhood, what comparable properties were selling for. I'd thought he was interested because it was ours now, this unexpected piece of our life together. He'd suggested putting it on a rental platform to generate income, said he knew a property manager we could use, had already gotten a quote. I'd said I wasn't ready to make decisions yet, that I wanted to wait, and he'd let it go easily. Too easily looking back. He'd also started asking about the brokerage account. Not aggressively, never aggressively, that wasn't Nathan's style, but with this practiced reasonableness, little comments slipped into ordinary conversations. We should make sure the funds are invested properly. What are they currently in? Have you talked to a financial advisor? I know someone who specializes in inherited portfolios. Of course, whatever you want to do. I'd found it loving at the time. He wanted to protect what we had. That's what I told myself. Sitting in that parking lot, I thought about the timeline. The document had been notarized 6 weeks before Aunt Rosalie died, which meant Nathan had done this while she was on hospice. While I was driving back and forth to Portland, sleeping on her couch, holding her hand. While I thought he was home managing things, giving me space to be with her, he hadn't been managing things. He'd been managing me. I didn't go to Nathan that night. I didn't ask him about it. I smiled over green curry and listened to a story about a difficult client call and went to bed next to him like everything was exactly as it had appeared to be 24 hours ago. I was a better actor than I'd ever known. He thought I was tired from the estate appointment. I let him think that. The next morning I called my mother. We had a complicated relationship for a while after the wedding. She'd been cautious about Nathan from the start. In that way, mothers are cautious when they can feel something they can't quite name. She'd come to our engagement party and smiled and said all the right things, but on the drive home she'd told my father that Nathan's generosity felt like a performance. My father had relayed this to me, hoping I'd take it as a gentle caution. I'd taken it as an insult and said so. We hadn't fought exactly. We'd just gotten quieter, less frequent calls, shorter visits, the careful distance of people who love each other too much to say what they're both thinking. A year and a half of that, give or take. She picked up on the first ring. Mom. My voice cracked on the word. Just the one syllable and it cracked. Vivian. Her voice changed instantly. What happened? I told her everything. She didn't say a word the entire time. When I finished, there was a pause. Okay, she said. Here's what we're going to do. My mother is not a lawyer. She is a retired school administrator who ran a district of 1,200 students for 15 years and has never once in her life been outwitted by someone who thought they were smarter than her. She had a former colleague whose son was a fraud attorney in Portland. She had the number on my phone within the hour. The attorney was a woman named, I'll keep this vague for legal reasons, someone I will refer to as my lawyer. She had the energy of a person who has seen every variety of human deception and finds it professionally interesting rather than surprising. I sat across from her in a glass-walled conference room the next afternoon and laid out everything. The notary's account, the forged signature, the pattern of Nathan's financial questions. She listened. Then she said, "Do you have access to your aunt's original estate documents?" I did. She'd given me copies of everything years before she got sick, kept in a fireproof box in my closet that Nathan had never shown any interest in, probably because he hadn't known it existed. Good, my lawyer said. Don't move them. Don't tell your husband we've spoken. Go home, act normal, and let me work. She had an investigator. He took 9 days. What he found was this. The woman who had signed my aunt's name on that document was a notary from a different county who had lost her license 2 years earlier for exactly this kind of irregularity, signing documents as a stand-in for incapacitated parties. Nathan had found her through a connection neither my lawyer nor I fully understood, but the financial trail was there. He'd paid her $4,000 through a Venmo account she kept under a name that wasn't her legal one. Nathan also had $90,000 in personal debt, credit cards maxed out, a personal loan he'd taken 6 months before we met, and payments to something the investigator flagged as a private investment group that had collapsed. He'd been projecting financial stability our entire relationship. The consulting contracts, the business travel, the expensive restaurants he always insisted on, all of it funded on borrowed time. His income had dropped by 60% in the year before our wedding. He'd needed a solution. He'd found one, and she had been standing in her aunt's rose garden at their own wedding. There was also a woman in Phoenix, 2 years before me. Similar situation. She'd come into a small inheritance after her father's death. Nathan had been charming and attentive. They'd gotten serious quickly. He'd suggested opening a joint account to manage some shared expenses, which was reasonable for a couple, and had moved $22,000 out of it before she noticed. She'd confronted him. He'd vanished. She'd been too embarrassed to pursue it legally. The investigator found her. She was willing to talk. I met with her over a video call, just the two of us, no lawyers for that first conversation. Her name was Adrienne. She was 34 and looked tired in a specific way that I recognized because I'd been looking at it in my own mirror for weeks. She cried a little at the beginning of the call and then got very still. He has a type, she said. Women who've just lost someone. We're accessible, we're grateful for attention, we're distracted. I thought about Nathan showing up with Thai food and listening to me cry on my aunt's floor, about how I thought his presence in my grief meant he understood loss. He hadn't understood loss. He'd understood opportunity. I want to say I fell apart at some point during those 2 weeks. But I didn't. There was a cold clarity that moved into my chest somewhere around day 3 and never left. It wasn't anger exactly. Anger is hot, and this wasn't hot. This was precise. I had a forged document, a financial trail, a disgraced notary, a previous victim, and a husband who thought he was 8 moves ahead of a woman too saddened by her dead aunt to pay attention. He had no idea what kind of woman he'd actually married. My Aunt Rosalie used to say that the Callaway women were hard to fool and slow to forgive. She'd made it sound like a flaw, standing in her Portland living room with a folder full of evidence against my husband. I understood for the first time that she'd meant it as a compliment. We had been planning a small dinner to mark 6 months since Rosalie's passing. Her request, actually written in a letter she'd left with her attorney to be opened after the estate settled. She'd wanted the people who'd known her to eat good food, drink decent wine, and tell true stories about her. My mother, my 2 cousins, Nathan's sister, a handful of Rosalie's friends from her business and her neighborhood. 16 people. Her dining room table stretched to its full length. Her good dishes, the ones she'd collected piece by piece from estate sales over 30 years. Nathan was in his element at that kind of gathering. He was charming with strangers, warm with family, remembered people's names and asked about their kids and their jobs. Rosalie's friends adored him. He spent 20 minutes talking to her oldest friend about a fishing trip they'd both apparently taken to the same lake in Montana, though at different times. He was good. He'd always been good. I watched him work the room and thought about Adrian in Phoenix, about how she'd probably watched him work a room too, back when she still thought the warmth was real. Halfway through dinner, Nathan brought up the estate. He did it gently, framing it as a toast, raising his glass and saying something gracious about Rosalie's legacy and how much it meant to him to help protect what she'd built. Several people nodded. His sister touched his arm. My mother, across the table, met my eyes. Almost. After the dishes were cleared, I asked everyone to stay for a moment. I said I had something I wanted to share about the estate, something I'd learned recently that I thought the people in this room deserved to know. Nathan smiled, attentive, supportive, ready to play the role of devoted husband watching his wife navigate grief with grace. I pulled the folder from the sideboard behind me. 6 weeks before my aunt died, I said, while she was on hospice care and I was in this house sitting with her, someone came to a notary's office in this city and presented a forged document. The room went quiet. The particular quiet of people who've registered that something is wrong but haven't caught up to what it means yet. The document was a power of attorney. It granted full financial authority over this estate to my husband. I looked at Nathan. Would you like to explain that, or should I keep going? His expression didn't collapse all at once. It went in layers. The smile first. It didn't disappear so much as it suspended, froze midway through its own motion. Then the eyes, which stopped doing the thing eyes do when warmth is real. Then the shoulders, which dropped almost imperceptibly, like a structure that had been braced for impact, finally registering the hit. "Vivian," he said. Steady voice. "This is a misunderstanding." "It's not." I turned over the first page in the folder. "This is the document. This is a statement from the notary who processed it, who recognized that the signature was forged and came to me voluntarily. This is the payment record connecting you to the woman who signed my aunt's name." I turned another page. "And this is a statement from Adrian Walsh in Phoenix, who would like everyone in this room to know that you did something similar to her before you ever met me." Rosalie's oldest friend made a sound. Nathan's sister stood up from the table. "That is not," Nathan started. "I have 9 days of documentation here." My voice was even. I wasn't angry. That's the part I want people to understand. I was not angry in that room. I was absolutely calm in a way I had never been in my life. The way you are when you know exactly where you are and exactly what you're doing. My attorney has copies. So does the district attorney's office, because this is fraud, this is forgery, and you attempted to steal from a dead woman who trusted me. Nathan's chair scraped back. He stood up and looked around the room at the faces of people who had been laughing with him 40 minutes ago. His sister was crying. His mother-in-law, my mother, stood up from her seat and walked around the table until she was standing next to me, which is the most powerful thing she has ever done in her life, and she didn't even raise her voice to do it. "Nathan," said one of my cousins quietly, "stop talking." He didn't say another word. The 2 people from the county fraud unit who had been waiting in Rosalie's study came through the dining room door and introduced themselves, and Nathan went pale in a way that was different from the pallor of a man surprised. It was the pallor of a man who understood that the thing he'd been running from had been standing still and waiting for him to arrive. They walked him out through Rosalie's front door, the one with the original hardware she'd been so proud of, the brass knocker shaped like a heron, and I watched from the porch until the car was gone. The divorce was straightforward because Nathan had nothing that was legitimately his to negotiate with. The power of attorney was invalidated. The estate remained intact. The woman who'd signed my aunt's name, entered a plea agreement and cooperated with prosecutors. Nathan faced charges of fraud, forgery, and attempted theft from an estate, and the Phoenix case gave prosecutors what they needed to establish a pattern. Adrian flew up for one of the hearings. We had coffee beforehand, just the two of us, at a place near the courthouse. She seemed lighter than she'd been on that first video call. She told me she'd spent 2 years feeling like an idiot for missing it, and that watching it happen to someone else and seeing someone else catch it had done something for her that she hadn't been able to do for herself. You didn't miss it, I said. He was practiced. So were you, she said. At catching him. I thought about that on the drive home, about the notary who'd lost sleep over a signature, about my mother who'd known something was wrong at an engagement party 2 years before I was ready to hear it, about Rosalie, who'd held my hand a little too long by the rose bushes and said he's very polished, and who I think knew, even then, that there would come a day I would need the kind of woman I'd inherited from her. The Portland house is mine. I'm living in it now, actually. I moved in 3 months after the divorce was finalized. I kept Rosalie's furniture mostly as it was, rearranged a few things, painted one room a color she never would have chosen but that I love. I kept her rose bushes. I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing with them, but I'm learning, which she would have respected enormously. My mother comes for dinner on Sundays. We talk longer than we used to. We're making up for the distance, one conversation at a time, and neither one of us mentions the 18 months of quiet that passed between us while I was busy believing someone my instincts should have questioned from the start. She's earned the right to say I told you so. She won't. That's not what she's about, which is exactly why I should have trusted her in the first place. I learned something from all of this that I keep turning over. Nathan had counted on my grief. He'd timed everything around the period when I was least likely to be paying full attention to anything except surviving loss. He'd been patient about it, careful, let the relationship develop naturally over 14 months before the ring, because he understood that the longer he waited, the more I would trust him. What he hadn't counted on was that my aunt had spent 30 years showing me what it looks like when a woman knows her own mind. That the same person who'd left me her home had also left me something harder to quantify. A pattern, a standard, an example of what it looks like to navigate the world without needing anyone to rescue you. He thought he'd found a woman softened by grief. He'd found a Callaway, and he had the rest of a prison sentence to think carefully about that particular miscalculation. I keep thinking about the moment Mr. Featherstone set down his pen. Such a small gesture. A man who notarized documents every day of his working life, who could have processed that file and gone home and never said a word. He didn't have to call me. He didn't have to lose sleep over a signature that wasn't quite right. Nobody would have blamed him for missing it, but something in him wouldn't let it go, and that decision, that quiet, unglamorous decision to do the right thing, is the reason I still have my aunt's house. I think about that a lot, about how the whole thing unraveled not because of anything dramatic, but because one person chose honesty over convenience. And I think about how Nathan had built his entire plan on the assumption that nobody around me would make that choice. He'd counted on people looking the other way. He'd counted on me being too soft with grief to look closely. He'd counted on the world being as transactional as he was. He was wrong about all of it. What Nathan never understood, what I don't think he was capable of understanding, is that the things he was trying to steal can't actually be purchased or transferred or signed away on a fraudulent document. My aunt didn't leave me money. She left me a way of moving through the world. She left me the example of a woman who built something real over 30 years by being straight with people, by keeping her word, by knowing her own mind. That's not in any trust document. You can't forge a signature on it. I spent a long time after the divorce asking myself how I had missed it. The honest answer is that I didn't miss all of it. I felt things I explained away, noticed things I chose not to examine. Grief does that. It narrows your attention to what hurts, and it makes warmth feel like a lifeline even when the warmth isn't real. Nathan understood that, and he used it deliberately. That's not my failure. That's his character revealing itself. But here's what I learned about myself through all of it. I am more clear-headed under pressure than I knew. When Mr. Featherstone laid that document on his desk and the world tilted, I didn't fall apart. Something inside me got very still and very sharp. I'd always assumed that was just how I handled shock. Now, I think it was something my aunt had been building in me since I was small. This idea that when something is wrong, you figure out what it is and you handle it. You don't perform panic. You don't wait for someone to rescue you. You gather your information and you move. Adrian told me on that video call that watching me catch Nathan had done something for her that she hadn't been able to do alone. I think about that too. Because the truth is, she's the one who gave me the last piece I needed to understand what kind of man he actually was. Two women he'd tried to break, sitting across from each other, and neither one of us broken. There's something in that worth holding on to. My mother was right about him from the beginning. I pushed her away for 18 months because I didn't want her to be right. And the first thing she did when I called crying was ask me what I needed. Not "I told you so," not "I knew it." Just, "What do you need?" That is the most underrated form of strength I have ever witnessed. The willingness to be right and stay quiet about it. Because the person you love matters more than being acknowledged. I'm still learning from her. I think I'll be learning from her for a long time.